Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-host of the Seeds of Tao podcast alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. We're also the co-owners of the Seeds of Tao education platform, an incubator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for impact entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or impact entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Impact entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs, as we sometimes like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all that means as you join us for this and future episodes, but know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we are here doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from impact entrepreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful Regenerative Business Economies Network, aka RegenBen, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenpreneurs come together to build the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Seeds of Tao podcast. My name is Joshua Prieto, and this is a little bit more of a casual episode as we are sharing a recording from our masterclass that we did a couple months ago with Chloe, Buzzotta, and Leonie Brien. And Chloe and Leonie are good friends that we met a while back, and we had on the podcast. They shared their background in intentional communities and eco-villages, and we felt like it really made sense to start talking, having these discussions in the context of entrepreneurship and building regenerative enterprises in relation to the communities that we serve, right? And not only that, like ingraining our livelihood, the way, where we live, our neighborhoods, our communities into the businesses that we start, and having them be one in the same, which is a novel idea in a lot of ways. And eco-villages and intentional communities are an experimental version of this. I mean, we've had Maura Gamble on the podcast, who lives in one of the first permaculture eco-villages, and she runs a wonderful business teaching educators in the permaculture field to share the wisdom and understanding of permaculture into the world. And just in her eco-village, there's many other entrepreneurs and business owners that are working to do other projects, regenerative projects and services for their community and to the communities and that surround them, whether it's globally a global community or a hyper-local community. And so we see this hyper weaving of what our work and life is. And we really wanted to start bringing the conversation up more and more about these things called intentional communities and eco-villages. So we're going to share a little bit about this. I'm going to share a little bit about this masterclass before we dive into the recording of it, and just kind of introduce to you into what intentional communities are and eco-villages, and how maybe we can integrate the experimental side of what eco-villages and intentional communities are into kind of the experimental side of what it is to build a regenerative business and build the enterprises that we're building. So as you listen to the recording of this, the recording is very much done in a interactive way. It was done live with a group of entrepreneurs, a group of people that are actually trying to build community and do so with others, but realize that it's a business that they're starting, an intentional community, acts as an entity. Usually, sometimes it's a cooperative based on a farm or other land. And that land usually has some type of income generating factor that allows for others to live on that land, live together on that land, and work in community, right? And a lot of times we miss that side of things when we're building a community, that we have to work alongside the current economic structures that we have, even though we're experimenting in a new type of living in community or building an intentional community thing called an eco-village, right? And you may also be on this other, listening to this and thinking, this sounds quite a lot like a commune, like a hippie commune. And you would be correct in some phases, but all sorts of communities can come together and build together based upon certain belief structures and understandings and different projects that you want to work on together. And so the whole experiment here is to find ways that you can come together, work on things together that you're passionate about as a community, and then also share values and belief structures as well that allow you to live in community. And a good part of that is how you build out your regenerative enterprises that allow you to do that together. So we'll be talking about that in the masterclass. And so let's dive into this a little bit. I'm excited to share this masterclass. Know that as you are listening to this is done in a live with a live audience online through Zoom. So it might not have the same context as if you were to go on to our website, actually view the live recording that was held, where there's some slides on there that you can view, and there's a workshop that is done afterwards that is specifically helping you to come together, total strangers essentially, but try to figure out what common values you share. And this is a lot of times we have to do this in the communities that we're a part of. Understand the values that we share, and also understand the projects that we're working on that we could, or potential projects that we can work on it together as a community. And so there's a small exercise afterwards if you want to maybe try this with your own community or a potential community that you would like to build together, is talk about shared projects that you might have, shared values that you have, and see if you can work together in community on those projects and values. So with that being said, I'm going to get into the recording and hope you enjoy.
Who are we? I think I remember who I am, but just in case. No. So I am Chloe, and I served on the Global Eco Village Network, where I found my lovely partner, and together we created the Grounding Your Village course, which has over 100 people who've graduated. It was live online during COVID, and which is how I got really good at Zoom. And combined, we're both young, but combined, we have 50 years lived experience in intentional community, where we've lived in specific ones and we've traveled to a lot of different ones. And also working with the Global Eco Village Network, we've worked with a lot of different elders. So currently where we're at is we've built a tiny house, and we're actually calling in from our tiny house. It was a year of blood, sweat, and tears, and we're reaping the benefits now. It's been amazing. There's actually 5 of us living in here. Her son is here. He's 14, and we have a dog and a cat. So it's been quite a wild journey, and we're really happy to be dedicated to the cause. And it sounds like you all have some familiarity with that. And really what we want to do is bring intentional community to be more accessible. And Lilia will talk about that soon. And really a lot of what we're bringing here is, that accessibility piece. And also because we recognize that this systems issue has a whole systems solution. And that's kind of where our name has come from. And, what we're really trying to target here through accessibility.
So thank you. So my name is Lilia. I grew up in a community myself. My parents helped create a community back in 1984, back in Quebec. Over there, they were kind of in Quebec. They were pioneer in organic farming and also living in community. So I've been really fortunate to grow up in a community setting. I think I experienced a lot of positive side and a lot of things that I've been learning through my process being a community. I think what happened for me, if I want to do a little background, is I've been becoming a grown-up adults. I've been involved in many different boards, helping receiving different interns and having visitor on site. But then I was questioning how can I serve better the global community, because being nurtured in a very sacred place and very, very special environment, how can I give back to the broader community? Then what happened is I met Chloe through the Global Eco Village Network, because I was hosting an event and I received her with her group, young adults that were coming together to have that meeting and talking about solution. How can we do better to create the future we want to see? So I met Chloe and we both fell in love. And then we also have the common goals is to be able to give tools to people, because seeing those visitor coming in the community and having those interns experiencing different program we were offering, life or in community is not always easy. And I would say for most people, it's almost out of reach. It's not easy to think of joining a group or living in community, because there's many things that could happen. So what we seen that we can help with, it's with our personal living experience, what we've been gaining from those years, visiting different communities, is creating that set of tools that can help and support people to learn how to be able to live in communities. So that is where we all system network have been created, with that want. But also what happened is when I met Chloe, I decided to move out of my own community for the first time of my life. I was leaving my community, and I was almost 40 at that time already. And I was living a life with her in Austin, Texas. And that was a pure shock to me because the lack of having a support group around me, people that I can really trust, having also I didn't have that safety net that I was used to have around me. So really all those elements for me really helped me and Chloe to push forward and to create All System Network, and really wants to give back to the global community and really help people to be able to gain those tools, how to resolve conflicts, how to create collective businesses and stuff like that. So that's where we're coming from. But yeah, so I won't be surprising you, telling you that living in community is not always beautiful. It could have a lot of perk and a lot of benefit, but sometimes it can be also really hard. But still, there's few benefits I want to share with you. So I do feel that with the experience I had being part of different group in my community and serving on different boards, what you have is you have the chance when you create those places to be more like having stewardship and having a say on different decision that your business will want to take as action or has a different decision. So really creating an environment where people feel good and feel that they can be themselves and they could bring a lot to the community and to their businesses. Also, like we're sharing, like, yes, I was part of different group. I was a young mother. I have 2 children of my own. I have a 13 now and a 17 years old. But when I was serving in the community, I was needing like support at that level. So I always have like people that could help me. You can see the picture on the back is my good friend Benoit. He was taking the teenager like on hikes and doing sports while we were having those meetings. So really community can bring that sense of support and people that you can trust. Also, the reaping the benefit and harvesting the gain from your business is also, it's equally like dispersed. So you can find ways where people have input but also receive back and reaping, is that the correct one? Mm-hmm. Reaping the benefit of it. Same thing, another benefit that is really easy to grasp on is you are part of a big group and you can dream about almost anything if you do it right. So you can, as a group, decide that, oh, you want a grounded pool, heated pool, you want to have a hot tub. Like, not every family need to have their own hot tub. You can do it like collectively. So you can think about those things. Like, it's kind of, you can also think of purchasing a piece of land that is $1 million worth. Like, you're not doing it alone. So making sure that when you do, like, when you're forming your group in the right way with the right step, there's a lot more possibilities that is unfolding in front of you. And that's why we want really to share with people. We want to give access to those tools and make it more like achievable and affordable for people to do it. Do you want to add anything else?
So Leonie, Janine had a question for you.
Okay, yes, please.
Yeah. I wanted to just jump in. That I saw the question. It's a quick one and it adds to the context, but continue to add questions and we'll make sure to get to them. We have a good 15 minutes that will go over all the questions you have.
At the end?
Yeah, but this one is just... What we're talking about is intentional community, and that's what we teach about in our course and our education. But we also want this to apply to any cooperative. So it could be a business model. It could be, some type of land buying or even surplus food buying groups. We find that these tools are really important everywhere.
Yeah, it applies to anything. It applies to your own family if you want to. Those are like life skill, basic life skill that you can apply everywhere just to be better, like create better connection, create better like stability in your relationship, and also like making sure that, all your foundation are really secured.
Yeah, I think that was good. There you go. So we're going back into the problems and we're getting into that apocalypse mindset again, like you're in a really stressed situation, you don't know what's next. And you're like, okay, well, what's going to happen here? But no, in reality, there's a lot of issues that can happen when you're creating any type of project and you're putting many hours into a project. And yes, the more high stress the situation, the more things like this will happen. So one of the biggest problems, or just so for your awareness, is only 10% of forming communities succeed, and that usually happens within the first 2 years. So this is a really make it break it point, and that's really where we're coming from and why we're wanting to share the problems and the 4 pillars of success. So the first one is hours of confusing meetings without containers. So can I have a show of hands of people who've experienced that? Just a few? All right. Well, thank you for raising your hands. Yeah, I would say that almost everyone deals with this at least once, and that there is a much better way of handling a meeting, and that's a lot of what we teach about. But oftentimes there's, not a clear container. You don't really, you thought you were going into the meeting for one thing, but you end up being there, for something else, or all of a sudden it shifts and someone gets emotional, and which is not a bad thing, but it's just not a clear container. And also when that happens, the loudest in the meeting often wins, meaning they get to have the biggest voice, or people want to listen or have to listen to them. And again, that just is because there's really not a clear container. You want to be mad or upset at that person, but in reality it's not really them, it's just there's not training involved. Another piece is one owner promising to be benevolent dictators. And, this shifts a little bit when you're talking about more of a business mindset. When we're talking about living in community or land base, what oftentimes that we see is like, there's this one landowner and they're like, hey, come and live with our friend, you're friends of mine, or I have this groovy spot over here, like it has all the hookups, you want to bring your tiny house, or X, Y, and Z. And so, it all is good and fine at first until you realize as the participants and not the owner that you're starting to put a lot of work and energy into this space, and you're, like Lily was saying, you're not really getting the benefits out of the hard work that you're putting in. Sometimes you think you're getting that great support group, but then all of a sudden conflict happens and you're kicked out of your home that you worked again so hard to be a part of. There's all of these different scenarios that happen, and from the benevolent dictator side or the landowner, a lot of times they just feel really responsible. And, because I'm aware that there are people that it's like, oh, I want to do best. I just realize I'm responsible and I have to make this hard decision. Yes, you do, because you're in a position where you don't necessarily want or don't know how to allocate power, or in this case finances, to other people so that they have an equal share and equal responsibility in this space. There are ways you can do that, and that's a lot of what we teach about. And so also with the benevolent dictator and more of a business model, I think I could say it's easy for us to get burnt out living or working in a more corporate environment. I think, hopefully you haven't had to experience that, but almost everyone has had to deal with, annoying boss or someone who thinks that they know best, even though you might have even had more experience than them in some of these cases, or you've just feel like you want to feel heard in the organization. And so that's why we're a lot more interested in cooperative ways of owning things, owning businesses, owning, and dispersing wealth. And I know this is an ideal world, but there are ways that you can create more cooperative models at the end of the day. Lastly, seeing what the utopia is that we all have our children or even elders that we can support and take care of on these communities, or even cooperative homeschooling groups, or some child care setup. And the reality is there's a lot of values that can get in the way of that. One of my favorite examples is I've been around a homeschooling group where there was they were very like prepping oriented. They were growing a lot of food, utilizing permaculture techniques. There were having rain catchment and solar. And so they were all kind of on the same page, a little bit spiritually minded. So they were like, oh, like we don't need to make more agreements. Well, funny story, one ended up being vegan. And so they wanted their kids to be vegan. And the other one was running around with a toy gun and talking about hunting. No, neither of these are bad things in essence, like I don't want to say one's bad and one's good. But as you can see, when you have kids and you're homeschooling, it's really hard to separate that. And especially when you want the kids just to be in playtime and you don't really want to disrupt that, well, it gets complicated very quickly. So, the exercise we're going to do today, we will have a 40-minute time frame for this exercise. And we're going to be going into values that you may choose for your cooperative organizations or land-based community. So we'll get more into that. So the number one issue is the unclarity around common vision, values, and set agreements. And so we're kind of getting to this in all the pieces that we're describing. But at the end of the day, like if you're not motivated around a common cause, you haven't prioritized your value system, and you're not communicating, especially written agreements that you can refer back to, your community will fail. This cooperative organization you create will fail. Again, that's 90%. So now that I've told you all the horrible parts about community and what can go wrong there, I want to give you some hope here. There are 4 pillars of successful community, and this is something that we've consulted with groups of people. We have lived experience, and from all of that, we've came up with this list. The first one, like we've talked about, is community agreements. So again, even if you just jot your meeting notes on paper, that is an amazing start. There's so many meetings I've attended that they're just talking and they're not really, especially when it comes to a decision, they're not writing it down. So that's the first. And of course, like we said, you need to get more into that mission and vision mindset. And of course, you get into the HOAs and, land type agreements. You want dogs on your property, X, Y, and Z. Or you're doing a CSA and you're like, well, I thought the meetup point was going to be here, and now all of a sudden it's an hour away and I can't get there. It's simple things that get really twisted really quickly. The second one is decision making and governance. So this is a really important piece, and it's really hard for people to grapple with this one, especially if they have a big resistance to governance or government. And what we're just really trying to say here is that if you find clear methods of decision making and feel like everyone is being heard in your cooperative, it makes a really huge difference. And then you can apply that more structurally, but at least even starting with that decision-making ideology and having people a little bit more trained makes a huge difference. Thirdly, shared vision and values. So again, really being motivated and clear, that's what we call the glue of your community, making sure that it's discussed in detail. Usually we suggest taking a full day just to hammer out what your vision is. And a lot of times it feels really inspiring to do that. But some people, you can't get them sitting for more than 30 minutes. And I get that, but this is one of those things you need to come back to a lot. And then, of course, the values piece in that the values you create or that you not create, that you prioritize and that you discuss, that's your individual and then community ones, they reinforce that vision. And so you make a lot of your decisions based on those prioritized values. Lastly, what we've seen work really well in these communities is a thriving collective business. And this one's more, I would say, tangential, because I don't think it is realistic to say every community has to do this or that's what makes it successful. But I will say that the more that you can stack functions and that you're able to create something where you don't have to go out and you don't have to face zombies, and that you're able to create collective wealth. That is really the key there, is making wealth that builds throughout generations. Do you have anything to share?
I think it's pretty nice. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
And you don't want to take questions during?
No, I do want to now. This is just one slide that we prepared in our previous talks. This is some of the communities that we've worked with or have people that we know that work with them. It's just kind of inspiring to see them. Synergia Ranch, this is actually the Biosphere 2 project. And that's in Arizona. Dominicure, Italy, that's a very large, it's the largest intentional community in the world, or second largest. And they did have an underground temple that they dug with spoons initially. It's, as you can see, it's no longer just with spoons. Cheops is the business that Lilia was supporting at her community La Cité Ecologique. That way. There we go. We're sorry, I can't see with all of the Zoom tech. So this is another one. I'm forgetting the name, and it's not listed here, but it's in. I think it's close to Norway. Actually, I think it's in Denmark. It's a Earthship community that I visited. And then Tamara, they actually just had a documentary that came out, and I'm very curious to see it, but that's kind of, as you can see, they did this in Portugal. Well, you can't see that they did it in Portugal, but it was very dry, and they created an amazing landscape there, and they do a lot with human interaction as well.
Well, I can just say something. So I think all those communities that are listed there are communities that actually made it possible for their members to have access to work within the community. So it's also something that I think it's going, like we are focusing on the same goals here, is to create those livelihood pockets. Like, you create a community, it's not only like beautiful and the garden and stuff, but you also think that, okay, the reality is we are living on planet Earth right now, and our way of exchanging assets and belonging, it's by using that tools that we call money. So we need to find ways to help our members or people or friends that we are working with, that we want to create something with, we want to live on a piece of land with. How can we be like having that possibility in front of us and creating those like livelihood? We call them eco livelihood, but really like having that mindset also, not only like the living aspect in a beautiful area, but also like being able to offer to your members and to your group of people the access of those collective businesses.
Great. So we can move to questions, and I'm going to stop the screen share. I do see Janine's, so we can start with yours. Stop share. So let me go back to when you say create collective wealth, employee sharing program. I would say yes, and like I said, we more deal with land-based community. So we have worked in cooperatives. In fact, Lilia was working in a grocery co-op. Mm-hmm. But what's important there is that you have clear legal agreements, and that there's ways that people can have a buy-in process. And I think that for me, wealth is not just financial. Of course, that's a really important piece. And so, whether it's an LLC or literally a cooperative that people can have shares in is really important. Other pieces of wealth is skill-based, time-based. time banking, which can become financial, but I'm not good in economics and I don't want to get into that piece with you today, but more like literally the time spent doing things. If you're doing it together, that's really important. I heard a lot about homesteading and gardens, like, thinking about creating soil and growing food together. There's just so many different pieces there that you're growing together when you're doing it together.
Yeah. And I think also the idea behind that is, often you think of, you want to create a community or you want to escape the zombie apocalypse, but you still, like I said, we still live on planet Earth and we still have to deal with what already existed. So instead of like reinventing the whole wheel, we can use some tools that are already there and that can support your process. And you just merging like your vision with what already existing and using with the right tools, you can achieve what you want to create. And community open that door that you can basically create your whole like idyllic place, like your ideal place you want to live in your life. So that's really, really important. And that's where we want to. And there's some like community that have been like starting downtown LA, like LA Eco Village. It's a really nice one if you want to check it out in LA. So it's a community in a city and it's happening. There's another in Copenhagen also that's called, what is it called?
I wouldn't necessarily suggest going there. That's a group of anarchists, but
yeah, but that's the thing. Like
there's a lot of cooperative communities in the city for sure.
And intentional community, you just have to find like-minded people that wants to create the same thing as you want, and then you create your community. It could have like many different colors, like you pick.
The community is literally called LA Intentional Community, or LA Eco Village, I think. Let me look
right.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Because I know you ladies have seen all ranges of these communities. But in terms of the ones that really, I'm sure that no one gets completely 100% self-sufficient, but the ones that you have seen really do a lot or are able to be really self-sufficient, even if it's not 100%, is there like a size that works? You know what I mean? Like it needs to be big enough, but too big is not good. I'm wondering if
the favorite question.
Yeah. I don't know. I have different idea. I have at some point we have someone visiting a community. I was visiting a community down in Alaska, and that he was a doctor, and he says that what can work the best is under 150 people as a community, as a number. For me, I grew up in a community that was pretty much the number we were at when I was a kid. We were 150 people back in Quebec, Canada. That was okay. Then I experienced a community. I started another community in New Hampshire, and we were more around 40, 50 people. And both communities were working fine, but I find myself have a better connection with the people in New Hampshire because we were a closest group. So I won't go over 150 for my opinion.
And something I will say is not a number, but more an ideology around it. And it's called human scale. And it's something that I love to apply because that's my ideal world, is what this means. And I actually learned this from the transition town movement, which they do this in townships rather than communities. So they really, if you haven't heard of them, they're really amazing. And they work with, I think, up to 1,000 in kind of almost pods, but they break the towns into more of a village, and they bring it back to that type of mentality. And so human scale to me means that these people, and you might not know them personally, but the theory around it is that once you're too big, that's when a lot more crime happens, and because there's also a lot less trust and accountability. And so, that can happen in 150 really quickly. Everyone knows if there's a crime happening like that, and that's also makes people afraid or shameful of doing a crime, and they also feel a lot better to be a contributor in those spaces. When you're starting to not feel heard and you're finding like you don't know your neighbor anymore, which it's way too common, then you have a lot bigger issues. So yeah.
I just want to mention this book, if you're not familiar with it, To Human Scale by Patrick Sale. It is so excellent, so very excellent. And yeah, appropriate scale is essential. I mean, so often the conversation gets around to like scaling up technology, scaling up this, that, and the other thing. But there's times where, there's times when scaling down is appropriate, or just finding that appropriate scale. Small is beautiful.
Yeah.
I would love to talk about kind of social justice elements and kind of models that also incorporate like sweat equity. Currently, I'm working with a couple that have 100 acres and they want to create this like farming and permaculture scene. And they own the land and they don't need people coming in with chunks of money, although it's undeveloped. So people with chunks of money would be good. But we want to create these documents where the people that show up and do the farming and develop it, and do the permaculture and all the things will have ownership. So do you have any good resources for those particular kinds of models, or B, just kind of talking about the social justice elements as well? Personally, I think permaculture could save the world. And I think the more the people on the land doing permaculture so that we, have, food within bioregions and we can sequester the carbons, we could, restore hydrological cycles and so forth. But we need the people on the land. Mm-hmm. And so all these different ways. And then the intentional community thing is so popular right now, but so to have a lot of these different models just to get the people on the land. And also what I think of with the biocultural corridor is there's these more immediate and intermediary ways to get on land. Like so often intentional communities, you come, you put down your chunk of money and then you're making this lifetime commitment, and then, but, are there ways to kind of like dive in and, be there for a couple of years or whatever, and just more flow within that. Another idea that I'm working with is this idea of a permaculture caretakers, a certified permaculture caretakers program. So it would train like single mothers and women of color in permaculture, and then help place them as caretakers on land. And that could, be whether it's a foundational land or a private landowner, or even intentional communities that just want more people with skills. Because, these people would come in with mad skills. They would have the organization behind them, with all kinds of resources, goat herd that could be, moved around to different properties and all kinds of continuing education and so forth. And so, what are some of those innovations in that arena?
Well, I think for now I'll tackle the sweat equity piece. That's a huge, especially going to different communities just to experience them in my 20s. It was huge for me. And that, just working on properties. And the best model I've seen, well, there's a few pieces there, but what I see to start with, like bare minimum, is a spreadsheet. And what I mean by that is you set a price and you say like your rent is X, Y, and Z. And then you can put tasks there, be directive. But in that also, you put what the hour is worth. Now, I know that already becomes tricky. Maybe you decide as a community, or as the founders, that these people are coming in and everyone knows coming in that it's going to be $15 an hour. And yeah, that kind of sucks, but you're also getting to live for free or very cheap because you're meeting these hours. And in our case, when we were doing that, it was $750 per month, which still was very reasonable for rent. And, that specific person was like, well, you still have to pay $200 a month regardless, because I need to pay my bills. But you make that spreadsheet and give it to me every month, and we'll take off 500 or 550 of that. And so that was a really cool model. That's not building wealth in that scenario, but it feels really fair in ways I haven't seen it feel so fair previous. Yeah. So another piece there is then creating agreements that maybe after 1 year, because you don't want necessarily people to build equity right away. There is definitely like an integration period, and I think you were getting to that, Alexa. So having someone maybe who would sponsor you or put some of the money up front, and then having that clear agreement. And at that point, you need to make a legal note of what's happening. And when you're creating that note, that you can I was just telling one of my friends that I helped consulted with the other day, have a paper trail. No matter what you're doing, have a paper trail. So, maybe every month the founder, the community members are signing off on, you worked X amount of hours, and that goes towards the amount that's owed. So there's, really easy techniques, but the biggest thing is making sure that this is all agreed to up front. The hourly wage is agreed to, because that can change when you're actually living. Like when we were designing this, we were talking about consultancy versus landscaping. Landscaping would be worth this amount, but consultancy work would be that amount. And so obviously that could be a very different amount, unfortunately, in today's world. But that's the truth of it.
Yeah, I love it. And also I would add to that, having option for the people that wants to join that project would be really awesome. Options to having like $15 an hour for any type of job that you can do, or different wage if it's something else, but also probably having the option to eventually buying a share and really have like something to do with that property, that community, like whatever you're creating. Like if it's a farm, like having owning something, it's really nice. I think everyone loves to be like having that feeling that they own something. I think even for, I was just thinking when you were saying like, I want to train women of color so they can help and they can, well, make sure that those women are like feeling good and heard, and also that they have a say, and they probably wants also to have a share eventually of that business. Because not only like working for free and being seen like, okay, maybe the expert, but in that, we're sorry to say that, but we still women. And we still, and women of color as well, like sometimes it's not the same as a man doing the same job. Yes, so your piece of talking about activism, and I'm a big fan of
we're really into what you're sharing,
feminist, and that's beautiful, and I'm really happy that you're doing it. But I think the piece sometimes that we forget when we do those time banking and stuff is to have the option for people to actually be eventually becoming owner and have some.
Yeah, that's super crucial for me, because there's wonderful things like the organic volunteers and woofers and this, that, and the other thing, but you could go somewhere and maybe learn a little bit, or stay somewhere for free or whatever. But these models that really kind of get people into land ownership, and I certainly think about that with the caretakers program, and that there's could be these land trusts that are created. There could be somebody that brings on a caretaker or two or three, and they end up then leaving the property to the caretakers. Maybe they're elderly and they want to be able to stay on site and not have to go up, and that's why they're bringing the caretaker in. And then once we start kind of having these properties within this network for the caretakers that, more caretakers, could come on and have places to be. Maybe there's a caretaker that's kind of new in the program, but is, kind of up in the air. Like they went through the training, but they were at one place and that ended for whatever reason. And we need to find them another spot, but they go over here for a little bit, on one of these lands that is now owned within that, structure, that, land trust or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. Alexa, thanks for all your input.
That'd be great. Yeah. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I guess I have a question, and that is, I wanted to learn a little bit more about how your whole systems network works. And is it membership across your network, or is it more focused on building these smaller townships or whatever your communities and your growing membership that way? I'm just kind of curious in learning more about how you're working to help this movement thrive.
Yeah, that's a great question. We did have a mighty network where people were just a part of, and our nonprofit right now is just at bandwidth. Like we both have part-time jobs, and we've just recently got this self-paced course up and running thanks to a really amazing business consultant and friend who donated a lot of his time. Well, it was an exchange, but we'll get into that later. So
did you like Mighty Networks? Can I just ask you?
Yeah,
because that's something that I've been looking at for our organization.
Something recently that I didn't like, and so I might have to be reserved in what I'm saying because, yeah, they made a huge shift out of topic groups. I think it's probably premium now. I don't know where it went. So that's huge. I would even opt into like Telegram or Discord at this point just because of that, unfortunately.
What were the other ones that you mentioned? Telegram?
Yeah, Telegram. Well, Discord is more, or even Slack. Discord or Slack is basically the same. And then Telegram. No, she wants to.
I was just curious. I think the founder of Mighty Networks just has written a book, so I saw that was available.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it at first. I just think that they created a pretty big shift I need to look into more because that was also part of our course offering. But at still what I was getting at is that at that space, because we're such a big network, not necessarily whole systems network by itself, but we have so many collaborative partners like the Global Eco Village Network, and just we're often finding founders or people with land who want to start a community. And then of course, we're always finding people who are looking for land. So we found these great pairings, but like I said, we just end up not having the bandwidth to keep it going, especially for free or very low cost. So we're at this point, we're just really focusing on giving them the tools and education. And once we really build back that network, we might pivot back to making these resources even more accessible. I would say that the course, for what it's priced for and the fact that as group coaching, it's very affordable for people. However, yeah, we want to do even more. I mean, I love what all of the things Alexa was sharing, and we have other people talking to us about similar things for sure. Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about pairings and helping to connect people, is it basically a matchmaking function?
We have a friend.
In terms of people looking for land and people that have the land?
Say it again?
Is it a matchmaking function in terms of people who are looking for land and people who have the land?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that's specifically like one of our services. It's something that I just kind of do naturally, but I'm trying to scale back more, just again, bandwidth. But there is a network and there is a group we're working with. And of course, if, you're more involved with what we're doing, we could support that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. Any other questions before we go into the workshop section?
I had a really quick question. Oh, no, go ahead, Liz.
Go ahead.
Well, I had to step out. Somebody came to my door. I don't know if you covered this already, but what about in cases? What have you seen where in cases where there's a deliberate sabotage of something? Like, how does the community handle when there's like really a bad actor and there's no nice way to put that? So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. I guess something's coming up for you?
Well, I mean, that's what we were suggesting earlier is that's a step that it's sometimes overlooked, and really take the time to create like exiting like a protocol. It's something you need to start working at the beginning of your community. As funny as it sounds, like people are not thinking about that, but you need to have like really clear agreement and protocol for people that are joining a community, but also when it's the time for them to exit the community, and how those things should be approached and done. And all those agreements, in our class, we talk more about it, but you will create bylaws, you will create those agreements, and those needs to be signed once a year by your member. So people are agree and they sign it. So you have like something to go back to if something like that happens.
Yeah. And of course, you can't foresee everything, but I think what you're saying is, I think maybe we could all imagine something of what that looks like, but honestly, it always is biased, and it's hard to say who's at fault in a lot of these situations. So yeah, I think Lilia is really spot on with that. And you live and learn. I think protocols are really important, and more important than living and learning. But that's just my anal structure that I love having. But that being said, having the tools, or, it goes back to, what do you bring on the apocalypse? Your mind. Yes. And the more that you can have training and people that are like really rooted and grounded and navigating with conflict resolution, for instance, and everyone kind of at least vaguely understands protocols and who to go to if there's something that, is detrimental or shocking to one person, right? It's like, even just knowing who you're going to reach out to and who to, and a lot of the times, unfortunately, is the people just passing through because they're the weakest link. They don't know, or children or whatever, and it's like, you need to make it feel really safe in those situations. And we could be talking about a lot of different things. It could be financial, etc. If you are talking about financial, what I would also suggest, just like a business, and, we could be talking about a business cooperatively, you do need in every business plan, there's exit protocols. Yeah. This is the same thing. You need to know what it looks like upon entering, also what it's going to look like upon exiting. And that's a huge issue in intentional community. It's like, her parents lived there for 35 years as well, and they're in their now longer, 40 years. And they're in their 70s and 80s, and it's like, fortunately, they have built collective wealth and they will be okay. But a lot of times you have to ask the question, what happens when you have to go into an old age home, or what do you have to do when you do this and that? And because
it's reality. And conflict, conflict raise like emotion, and emotion are so hard to deal with. Like, you don't know what you do with them. So if you don't have anything in place like that, you can just cool off and be calm and just take the piece of paper. Okay, what did we agree on? And then you go from there. It's really mediator. Have a way, have a protocol, have a mediator, whatever, a way to solve conflict. It needs to be talked beforehand, because when the conflict is there, it's not the time to talk about it. Everyone is woo, on edge, and that's no way. Nothing will get good out of it.
Her community, what they do is they just tell people that they have to move to another location, and they just
it depends the conflict, but it happens sometimes that people are having a hard time with their neighbors, and we just create a whole random move, and people are just moving spaces, and that's the way to solve the conflict.
100 people just move.
Oh yeah, it is 100 people moving. It's a chain reaction. Yeah. And what else?
So I think that would be a good seg. Oh wait, no. Let's go to Emily. You had a question, then Xavier.
Oh, just a really fast question, just out of curiosity. Have you seen any communities or worked with any communities in Latin America that's not a bunch of gringos coming to Latin America due to the community?
That's a really awesome question.
That is not gringos that are coming to the community.
Right, actual
funding the community.
Actual in Latin America, Latin Americans doing these communities? Because I feel like when we find them, it's people coming from away to start them in Latin America.
Yeah, I will say.
Yes, I'm gonna. So what I experienced, like when I visited, we went to Mexico. We spent seven months in Mexico, and that was kind of an eye opener for me to see. I was also having that question. I said, why are like just locals here in Mexico are not attracted to like communities or to live in community? Well, basically because the sense of family and communities are present in their culture. They're not like us, like they still together, they still support each other. So I think it's just like the needs, like they're not lonely like we are. They're not living in their little house or not knowing their neighbors. They know their neighbors, and they had thrown like amazing party. I can tell. Like every other night we had a party. Like that was really loud. But I mean, yes. So I feel like we want to create this community when it's like diverse and we are all mixed together. But we also need to be like aware that they have a lot to teach us, I think, in terms of communities and how we think we can build them.
I definitely would say I would agree with my personal experience there with traveling. And I think we wanted to build a community there, and we did have a lot of those like, well, it's not, I think there was also a language barrier and of course cultural barriers. So there's pieces like that. But I would say there is a lot more intentional community just because it's natural there. And then, but the people that we were able to interact with, for instance, we helped build an earthship with a Latino, and she owned the property. It was a really cool experience. And so she had been, educated, and she did go to like the US for some education. And so anyways, it was cool to hear some of her perspectives and other people. But I think that there is still a lot of people who want that. And when they're explained more of like the idea, they're like, one, either like, oh yeah, of course we understand that, or two, like I want to learn more and I would be interested. And I think more of their need, especially more like South America, Central South America, is more of the equity-based situation. Like they're really needing more support in that. And working the Global Eco Village Network, I did work with, I don't know how active it is because some of it kind of fell apart, but there is a whole, it's called CASA. But it's still good. Running. Okay, CASA region. I'm gonna write it. Global Eco Village Network. There is a huge base, and there I met a lot of region. That's the region. Anyways, yeah. So there's a lot more we could say about that, but I think also one piece that was hard again with the language barrier, but everyone's so independent, at least in Mexico, that it's like you go into a whole new world. Just even every township you go into, it's like you thought you knew something about Mexico, and then all of a sudden you come here and you go there and you're like, what? Like this is completely different. You might face this in Panama, but yeah.
We have also talked a few times with someone. Her name is Crystal Bird Farmer, and she wrote a book called The Token. And when we talk about that, she was also trying. She had a young daughter, and she was trying to maybe finding a community to join, and we were just brainstorming about idea. How can we create those communities that are more diverse? And she was bringing a good point is community that have started mainly with white people. And that's the core foundational group that will start the community. So at the very beginning, if we would be able to integrate those people, native people more, or people of color, or any culture that you want to be part of your community as the funding team, I think that would be really helpful to have a better sense of what they actually need. Because we as white people, we are like, oh, we think that, but how do we know?
Thanks again for joining us on the Seeds of Doubt podcast. This recording of the masterclass we had with Chloe and Leonie is actually also on the resource commons that you can find on our website. If you go to our website, seedsofdao.com, and you click on Join Community, there are a bunch of free resources that the community has access to. We do a masterclass about every month, and we record it, and they're on different topics. They're always done by an entrepreneur that is building a regenerative enterprise, and they're sharing a knowledge base that they have become a master at. And so you can listen to past masterclasses, you can listen to past think tanks and other resources that we have, events that we have in the community of regenerative entrepreneurs. And you can also join us for future events by joining the community there. So head over to there to join us as a part of the community. If you are interested in anything that Chloe and Leonie were talking about building intentional communities, maybe starting your own eco-village, in the show notes, you will see the links to their course. And you actually, I think, have a discount being a part of the Seeds of Doubt community. So I will leave that information in the show notes as well. And I look forward to talking to you on the next episode of the Seeds of Doubt podcast. Bye for now.